Hey guys, we're here at GDC and we're talking to Nyam Nyam, who was the developer of Tengami a couple of years ago, one of the better games on the App Store. And we're going to be checking out one of their new upcoming games, Astrologaster, which I think I pronounced correctly. And it's an astrology-based adventure game sort of thing, or?
Yeah, kind of. It's a comedy game, first and foremost.
Comedy,
Think
cool.
British sitcom, like Monty Python, you know, back in the day.
Okay.
Nowadays, Abstract Crow on the BBC.
Oh, cool.
And it's based on real historic events, and you are kind of like guiding along this man called Simon Foreman.
Okay.
And back in the day, in the 16th century, he was a medical astrologer. And the way that you need to think about this is he was a one-stop shop for everybody's problems. So problems range from I have a serious illness to I need some kind of romance advice to help me with my business investments or kind of like political intrigues. And the way that he helped these people, and what you are going to do is he did astrology to find answers in the stars.
Okay.
And so the game. So now we are outside his practice, and we have our first patient, or querent, arriving, and it's Lancelot Moore, and he's a young man.
Whoa, that's cool.
So they reused Tengami engine.
Yeah.
And there will be a little bit of an introduction why he came. So he's going to tell us that he has fallen in love with a rather beautiful woman, and he wants us to help him to win her hand in marriage.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Should I skip along?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so I'll just skip through that.
That's fine, yeah.
And the dialogue is quite funny, obviously, since it's a sitcom.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it repeats you the question, so how can Lancelot win over this woman? And what we are looking at now is a map of the sky that is separated into 12 sections. And these 12 sections are called houses in astrology. And there are 4 possible interpretations of what the stars are saying, A, B, C, and D. And don't think about this as a quiz. It's not there is like a correct answer. It's more like there are less harmful answers than others, okay? And so I'm going to have a look at what interpretation B is all about. So interpretation B is about house 1. And house 1 tells me something about the patient. And so house 1 thinks that this Lancelot Moore is kind of like a very blunt character. And house 7 is about marriage. And house 7 has Venus in it. And this tells us that if Moore wants to win this woman's hand in marriage, he has to kind of like woo her with jewelry and fine things. And then we also have house 12. And house 12 is about secrets. And the secret is, according to the planet Jupiter, that she is kind of like falsely pious. So she's kind of like, you know, putting on to be this very modest woman. But really, just like house 7 told us earlier, she likes like fine nicks and necks. Okay, let's look at A. A is houses 4 and 10. House 4 is about hopes, and the house says that if he is a patient, that Saturn promises that she will, you know, eventually come around to him. And house 10 is about religion, and so if he had played the game for a little longer, he would know that Lancelot is a Catholic, and the woman that he likes or that he wants to marry is a Puritan, and that was a big no-no back in the day. So here Uranus and Pluto are basically recommending that he needs to convert his religion to Puritanism in order to win a hand.
Yeah, we haven't fully factored that in, but it does really help with there being...
Yeah, and then answer C, it's not an answer, it's an interpretation. So there seems to be some problems with the father's business partner. He seems to be deceitful. And so, because apparently the family has financial problems, Neptune recommends that if Lancelot lies about his finances, that they are probably, you know, like kind of like sell off her daughter to them. Interpretation D is kind of like is a cop-out answer where it would just say the stars are inconclusive. So if you don't want to answer the question, just always go for D.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference? Do you want him to convert his religion? Woo
Yeah.
with presents?
Let's do the one where we gotta buy her the nice things.
Okay.
That seems like a good tactic.
That seems like a good tactic,
Yeah.
alright. Interpretation A.
At like a certain level, you get a discount on your submissions.
Yeah, and so Foreman is going to deliver your judgment of the stars. Oh, I think I picked the wrong one.
Oh no. Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, so we are telling him to convert his religion.
That's a good option too.
And so
convert your religion.
So basically, so this guy is gonna go off now and may or may not act on your advice, depending on how he thinks about it. And there's kind of like a long-term and a short-term strategy.
Okay.
So in the short term, you have a trust and satisfaction rating with the patient, and this would now increase or decrease depending on the advice that you gave. But let's say maybe the patient is unhappy that you told him to convert his religion.
Yeah.
So his satisfaction might drop now. But in the long term, it might increase significantly because he acts on your advice and it works.
Oh wow.
So you always need to think about kind of like short-term and long-term trade-offs.
Yeah.
Also, all of the patients, well, the majority of the patients are interconnected.
Yeah.
And so you will like accumulate a decent amount of gossip. So sometimes you actually know what the correct answer is. You just need to find a way to make the stars say that.
Oh, wow.
If you're so inclined.
Interesting.
But if you just always kind of like wanted to mess them up,
Yeah.
give them like the most terrible advice that you can.
Yeah.
That's possible as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's Thomas Black. He always comes for business advice. He's not the kind of like the sharpest tool, and he already has a bad kind of like series of investments that he made, and he wants to know about a treasure ship that he invested in to find Spanish treasure somewhere in the ocean. If you had played the game all from the beginning, you would know that this treasure expedition came to you earlier to ask where to sail to.
Oh, okay. So you can totally like screw them over by telling them where he's at.
Well, you probably can't even correctly tell them where to go because that's not like the game doesn't say astrology works or astrology knows any answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I always like the same way. So it's about foreign countries. So there seems to be some kind of violent battle going on. So maybe this ship, this expedition, is fighting with pirates. But God is on the side of Thomas Black because Neptune is lending his intuition to that expedition. And this is about finances, and this seems to indicate that everything's going really well for the Black family fortune, because the moon is shining its benevolent light on it.
Well, that's a happy outcome. Let's choose that.
All right.
That's so cool. So he's happy.
Yeah, he's really happy. But he will come back to you a little later in the game. And it's not going to be happy with
mad
you.
about something.
Yeah, because actually the expedition was a complete failure.
Oh, okay.
And he will want to know why you didn't know that.
So what's the the end game?
So there's going to be roughly 20 patients, and each of them have a series of consultations. And you want to see all of the consultations, as well as unlock all of the patients. So if patients will refer other patients, that's one of the goals. And the other is there's a meta game to it, where you are trying to get your medical license.
Oh, wow.
Because at the moment we are unlicensed doctors.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
And the way that the real Simon Foreman did it back in the day was he made a lot of people really happy, and they wrote recommendation letters on his behalf to the University of Cambridge. And eventually, after he had accumulated enough letters, they gave him his medical license. in a kind of like a 6 months crash medical course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so there's also a bit of a kind of like a rivalry going on with the medical establishment at the time, because they are quite jealous of Foreman, because even though he doesn't know much about medicine really, he's incredibly successful, and you kind of need to fend them off and avoid being thrown in jail. And
that's funny. Well, it seems really cool. When do you think you're going to be launching?
Either at the end of the year or in February.
In a year, early next year?
It depends. I don't want to launch it on Christmas period.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that's a look at Astrologaster, and looks really cool. Hopefully we'll be checking it out later this year or early next. Thanks so much.